Hello, dudes and dudettes. Vex here.
And Vanessa here.
Originally, the cat was going to be the voice behind this video, but seeing as how in the last video not many people liked his voice, he locked himself inside a maximum security vault, crying all his dysphoric sorrows away. Kinda sounds like coping if you ask me.
Hey, don't be so harsh. Loon left us a note telling us that he is working on making his voice more enjoyable to tune on into, so we'll get a chance to shine instead. According to Loon's script, he kinda yaps about not meeting some kind of deadline and mentioned that he was going to review a movie known as Cool World.
Let me see that. Anywho, today I will be reviewing a movie known as Cool World. Let's get into the shenanigans, shall we? Cool World is a live-action animated movie released by Paramount on July 10th, 1992. This movie had a budget of $28 million and only grossed $14 million. Kinda reminds me of certain movies the past couple years. And this movie was a summer movie when teens got off of school for a couple months and still managed to fail in the box office. Wanna know why I say teens? Because Cool World is rated PG-13 despite some things in it not being so PG-13 in the modern day.
Cool World is directed by an animator, writer, executive, and director known as Ralph Bakshi. He was known to have created a lot of adult-oriented films during his time. His most known film was Fritz the Cat. In other words, we would consider him to have been known or semi-known. This movie was originally pitched to Paramount as a horror movie about a human cartoonist who created a comic in prison. He was supposed to end up doing the deed with a cartoon character and end up having a kid that's half cartoon and half human. The kid would then go after the cartoonist in the real world to try and kill him due to being abandoned as a child.
Hi, I'm Brad Pitt and I'm gonna get abducted.
Altercations with a Paramount producer known as Frank Mancuso Jr. rewriting the film without Bakshi knowing, this would end up changing into the Cool World we know today.
It was even said by Bakshi himself that Kim Basinger wanted the movie to have a PG rating. Take that last sentence with a grain of salt though, since it's not been confirmed if she said that. Cool World even has some famous actors / people like Brad Pitt and Frank Sinatra. During production, Bakshi initially planned on casting Drew Barrymore, but Kim Basinger and Gabriel Byrne were casted instead since apparently they were more famous than her at the time. Ah yes, nepotism at its finest. If you really want to see it at its true finest, you should really look at the 2010s to early 2020s movies. You'll see the names of famous people plastered all over the place. For a better understanding, the Paramount executives basically fucked Bakshi over.
That's horrible, but will we still review this movie?
Obviously, we'll do that, Vanessa. I mean, just because Ralph Bakshi got fucked over by Paramount doesn't mean that Cool World shouldn't get reviewed or critiqued. Even the best rated movies get critiqued in some way or another.
Maybe we should review another one of his movies that he had way more creative control over in the future. Actually, Moon doesn't know I suggested doing this until the video releases, but if this video gets 400 views and 10 likes, we'll review Fritz the Cat.
I won't be doing all that. I'm just here because the cat made us review Cool World.
That's alright, Vex. I can always have Grey help instead.
Well anyways. When it comes to the controversies this movie had, there was this cutout that Paramount had of the character Holly on the D part of the Hollywood sign.
It's Hollywood, baby.
They were said to have made sure everything was approved in order to do it first. Initially, this wasn't approved until Paramount also had donated $27,000 to the parks to try and keep the sign up, as well as another $27,000 to rebuild LA from the riots that happened earlier that year.
For some context and summary, the LA riots were riots that took place in the LA metropolitan area from April 29th, 1992 to May 4th, 1992. While technically the riots ended on the 4th, there were still instances of crime and violence for days afterwards, causing National Guard and federal troops to remain until later that very same month. These riots took place due to police brutality that happened to a man known as Rodney King. When the mayor announced the verdict, he was angry about how they concluded that no real brutality happened, eventually causing outrage and riots. There's a lot more to this, but I'm sure Loon wouldn't want me taking up a bunch of time on this. The link is in the description if you want to read more about the riots. Anywho, back to you, Vex!
People from Hollywood even got so mad at the cutout to the point they were suing Paramount over it. For some odd reason, I feel like this is a more bigger issue for Hollywood to be annoyed about than what they were annoyed about in more modern movies. Oh, never mind. They still had claims of it exploiting women just because they felt Holly was too over-sexualized. I guess things really didn't change over the span of 30 years, did they? In the end, Paramount took down the cutout of Holly.
Another thing that Loon wanted us to mention before we get to the next section is in regards to other media created besides the movie. Cool World had a 4-issue prequel comic book published by DC Comics. Video games in 1992 had 2 other games that released for the NES and the SNES in 1993, and there was a Game Boy version as well. Nevertheless, let's discuss the plot for the movie.
For the basic plot of Cool World, the main character Frank gets back from World War II and gets to see his mom again. It cuts to the house. Frank gets a motorcycle kind of vehicle for his mom and they go and ride it. When riding it, they basically get into an accident with the drunken couple and the mom dies. Frank then suddenly gets isekai'd into the cartoon world. Or shall I say, it looks more like this. The scientist introduces himself as Dr. Whiskers and basically explains to him basic stuff about the cool world, like how humans are considered noids and the cartoons are considered doodles. Frank being transported into the cool world is rare in that he needs Frank to take care of things while he's gone. The movie then cuts to a prison where we get introduced to Jack Deebs. Holly basically comes to life and spooks Jack before isekai'ing him into the cool world, similar to Frank. After this, Frank basically tries to discourage Holly from wanting to go to the real world, which obviously doesn't work.
In the real world, Jack gets released from prison and somehow gets a house during that short time frame. He goes to his local comic shop, autographs someone's paper, and goes back home afterwards. The movie cuts to a gang gambling with a rabbit who then tells the police about it. Jack goes to the cool world for a second time where he gets harassed by said gang. Holly then comes in and starts trying to convince Jack to do the deed with her. Due to the rabbit from earlier, Holly, her gang, and Jack get into a brief police chase scene, ending only when that gang gets rid of the police. Afterwards, they all go to the nightclub. Frank then is revealed to love a doodle known as Lynette. However, everything is platonic between them due to the previously mentioned rule about noids and doodles not being allowed to do the deed. Frank and Lynette basically have a brief talk about Holly as they walk to their car. Nails then tells Frank about the other noid, aka Jack, and they go to the club where Frank confronts Jack about the dangers of the pen and not to do the deed with Holly as the not destroy the universe.
Jack comes back to the real world for a second time and has this desert scene where he's just walking around while Holly becomes the voice in his head. He hears Holly's voice in his head and even in the walls when coming home too. Jack succumbs to the voice in his head telling him to do many unspeakable things and goes back to the cool world for the 3rd time.
Frank even warns Holly not to do the deed, but of course that warning wasn't heeded. Jack and Holly end up doing the deed anyways. Holly turns human and one of the first things she decided to do was to use the pen against Nails. After this, Holly and Jack go to the human world.
Holly is really excited about everything there is to offer in the real world. She even goes outside with Jack to where she sees a lot of men specifically. She then shows the lack of her inhibitions where she performs on stage with Frank Sinatra since he's in this movie too. Of course that quickly comes to an end when Holly flickers between doodle and human form. She runs out to Jack who is also experiencing the same thing happening to him. Frank goes into the real world to try and prevent anything from happening. When Holly and Jack are driving, she talks to Jack about the spike of power which has enough power to the point it transported Frank to the cool world. Holly basically wants to use it to remain annoyed forever. Jack gets kicked out of his own car by Holly after criticizing that idea and looks for the spike on her own. Frank makes it to the real world and teams up with Jack to find Holly. It's revealed that the story of Vegas Vinny is based on the scientist from the beginning of the movie. Vegas Vinny is actually Dr. Whiskers. Holly tries to kill him with the pen after a bit of talking with him, but of course this fails when Frank and Jack arrive. Dr. Whiskers only got his body parts detached so he didn't get absorbed like Nails. Probably also because Dr. Whiskers is necessary to the plot.
Holly climbs up to the top while being chased by Frank. While that happened, Frank got pushed off the hotel building by Holly when she tricked him into helping her. Jack then starts trying to stop Holly from taking out the spike. Jack ends up turning into a superhero due to the amount of power within the spike when he tried to take it from Holly. One guy even turns into a snake creature and people didn't even bat an eye. There's also a scene of Jack trying to return the spike over the course of a few minutes. Jack ends up putting the spike back and everything in the real world goes back to normal. Nails ends up being alive and takes Frank's corpse for Lynette to see. Since Frank was killed by Holly when she flickered into a doodle form, he ends up coming back to life as a doodle. Lynette and Frank are implied to have done the deed now that they aren't breaking any rules of the cool world.
Also, Jack and Holly are together in the cool world. Jack plans how their life will go, and Holly obviously hates it. That is the whole plot of the movie. Now we'll get to the part about what Loon thinks about the movie. I bet Loon is gonna hate that he can't say his own thoughts.
The overall movie wasn't that good, but it wasn't the worst. The only thing outside of the movie that was disappointing is how Loon thought it was going to be a better movie than it was due to the fact that it was an older movie. Then again, this did teach him a lesson to not have as much of a bias or expectation towards older movies. The voice acting of Cool World was alright. The actor should have tried to do a little better than to sound tired and done with acting on the movie.
A major problem we noticed in the movie is how much they cut out logic in order to make the plot progress. In the 40s scene, the stove is left on when they leave the house.
I forgot what a marvelous dancer you are.
And I forgot to turn the oven off.
Did you know that one of the leading causes of house fires is cooking, let alone unintended equipment from cooking? It's also not acknowledged in any sort of way if they turned off the heat off screen or not.
The second scene we'd like to mention when it comes to reinforcing the fact that logic is not in the movie is how Jack Deebs would have had a home so fast after getting out of prison. Back then, the Fair Housing Act wasn't changed to require people to let those have housing based on criminal records. This didn't happen till at least 2016 where they changed it, but there were clarifications of this in 2022 with a memo by the HUD. But this doesn't change anything I said. However, if the Fair Housing Act was in effect at the time, the possibility of Jack finding a house for himself the same day after being released would likely be a low chance. This is not good when it comes to writing as it worsens the movie. The writing of a movie should be one of the most important aspects when creating a film. It's what is essentially the backbone of a movie. Without a good story, the movie would end up having to rely on other aspects, which isn't a good thing in the grand scheme of things.
This also makes it worse when the animation isn't the best either. The animation had a lot of errors that could have been overall fixed. These scenes being where the dark marks that Holly made when getting out and going back into the paper, the way that blue and yellow electricity made Jack look when transporting to the cool world, as well as the way that Jack is falling down. You can even mention that when Jack finally did land into the cool world, the animation on the Anthro characters are similar to the likes of how when you view a 2D image on a Roblox game and it tries to show towards your camera angle.
If the animators of Cool World weren't told to animate whatever they wanted by the director in some of those scenes, maybe all of that could have been fixed. This is assuming that a portion of the budget went into unnecessary randomness that we end up seeing, though. One of the major scenes Loon listed in the script is when Holly is talking to Frank. There's random animation going on in the foreground that didn't need to be included. Another scene being the unnecessary stuff going on after Nails and Frank drive away.
There seems to be a lot of unnecessary stuff packed into Cool World as a whole. One of these scenes is where Frank and the mom are riding their motorcycle and a drunk couple comes out. There's a camera panning to a random guy who doesn't have any real relevance to the plot. This is one of those moments that could have been retconned from the movie and nothing would have changed. Removing a lot of the clutter and unnecessary stuff from the plot would actually make the movie a little better than it is. Another problem is when they say and a lot more than needed. The Frank and Lynette scene is a good example of this.
Because we can never finish it, Lynette, you know? It's frustrating. I'm like a plug without a socket, you know?
This makes me think that the actors would forget their lines and the director just gave up and kept it in.
A part towards the end of the movie we did have a problem with is how Holly didn't really get much of a consequence for literally almost destroying the universe, trying to murder Frank and his partner Nails to get what she wanted, and trying to manipulate Jack into all of this. Her moving with Jack in the cool world doesn't fit the consequences for what she did. Yes, she doesn't like the cool world as expressed in the movie and being forced to continually live there with Jack would suck for her, but the fact that Stewie Griffin got more consequences for his actions than Holly ever did makes me question everything wrong with this world. The last part we had a problem with is how the movie doesn't properly explain the cool world's rules, and as a result creates major plot holes. If Noids can turn into doodles, if killed by a doodle, why didn't Frank intentionally get killed by a doodle in order to do the deed with Lynette? Frank is a police officer and was in the cool world for more than 40 years, so he should have known about this. Since he also wanted to stay in the cool world anyways, wouldn't this come to mind as to make sure he doesn't ever go back? Also, wouldn't this rule work the other way around too, or only for the cool world? If it did work the other way around, why couldn't Holly have gotten killed by a Noid like Frank or Jack and become a human that way?
If Jack and Frank go back to the human world at will, and if Dr. Whiskers could be in the human world without dying or anything too severe besides hiding his identity, why didn't Holly think to have a Noid like Jack or Frank teleport her to the real world without doing the deed with Jack? Holly knows that Noids could do that because she calls Frank a coward for staying in the cool world. Sure, she still would have been a doodle if she did get teleported because Dr. Whiskers was one, but at least she's where she wants to be. When it comes to aspects we liked about Cool World, there are parts like the climax and the ending. Holly and the Doodles fight against Jack was one of those parts. This is one of the parts that had better animation on it, and the story around this point seems to be better than the rest of the movie. As was mentioned earlier, we still have a problem with its ending despite this. The climax and the ending seems to overall be the strong point of Cool World.
There was a second part Loon liked more than Vanessa and I did. It's the part where in the comic shop, one guy comes up to Jack and mentions the fact that he murdered the person his wife cheated on him with.
Hey, Deebs, why don't you do a book on that guy you murdered? You know, that guy you found in bed with your wife?
Thought this part was a little bit funny. The last part we did like is where Frank told Holly not to do something, and as he was leaving the mansion, Holly split her legs out of spite. Like, damn girl, MTV would have loved that one a decade or two later.
We also liked the music choice that Cool World chose for its movie. The 90s house music from Moby and other artists overall helped the movie despite its flaws.
With all these problems, it makes it hard to get immersed with the movie as a whole, leaving it to not be a good movie, hence why Loon rated it a 4 out of 10. If you want to see a movie with animation in real life done better, correctly, and even a better plot, I would personally recommend Space Jam instead. It was released within the same decade as Cool World, and it looks more like the characters are really there with the real life people. We had much more enjoyment out of that too.
Thank you for watching our first real review of the movie. I'm sure Loon would appreciate us doing this review for him when he sees this.
He might even stop crying and get out of that claustrophobic looking vault.
Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace!